set of videos, we're going to look at how we can use Xnormals to create our normal maps from our high poly. We're also going to use Nightshade Blockout to create our color map, and then we're going to move into Ddo to texture it. So let's get started. So what we're going to have to do is, firstly you've got to have modelled your high poly model, and your high poly basically contains all of your detail. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that detail and bake it down to our low poly. Now, what I did was I created the high poly first, and then created the low poly. You can work the other way around if you want. It's just entirely preference. Normally, I find working high to low is a lot easier. And these are all bits as well. So if I individually select them, you can see that it doesn't select the whole mesh. So these are kit. This is a kit basically that I've put together for the bake. So firstly, what we're going to do is let's just have a look at the UVs for the low poly. So as you can see, all the UVs are laid out, and this should give us a decent bake. And we've got the high poly here as well, which doesn't have any UVs. So high polys don't tend to need UVs. This is something what I was taught. It was called throwaway modeling. Obviously, you don't throw it away, but it doesn't need UVs because you're not going to texture it. Sometimes they do, depending if you are going to use this mesh in game. But it is 54,000 polys, so it kind of is a bit too high. So firstly, what we need to do is we need to make sure these sit on top of each other. So I'm just going to turn the grid back on. Okay. So now this is sitting with the pivot point on the X. I'm just going to move the pivot point. So press D, then hold V to snap it to the vert, and then hold X to bring it back up. And then I'm going to do the same with this as well. I'm going to bring that over and snap it to where it needs to go. As you can see, I haven't got any bits here because it's not going to bake. There's no detail going to bake there. So, right, firstly, we need to export this. Now I'm just going to rename this. Tommy would be shouting at me right now. I always put the prefix HP in there, and then I'm going to put Ash. And then I'm going to do the same with the low poly as well. So I'm just double clicking on here to rename it, and I'm just going to change that to Al. Okay, so I'm going to export my low poly first. So history, freeze transformations, and export selection. Now these can all be found here. So edit, delete by type, and if you want to add this to your toolbar, you can go Control Shift, and that will add it to your toolbar. So center pivot can be found here, and freeze transformations can be found here as well, and export selection is here. I always keep them on my bar here. So history, freeze, export. Now I'm going to navigate to where I saved this folder. I'm going to copy that. Okay, and I'm just going to go back one folder. Actually going to delete these. No, it's not going to let me. Never mind. I'm going to call this floor LP mesh. That's fine, don't need that yet. I'm going to do the same with this one, so history, freeze. Okay, and that's all we need to do inside of Maya, so let's switch over to Xnormals now. So this is Xnormals. It looks a bit old and decrepit and looks like it's come from Windows 1995. Don't let that fool you. It's a very powerful tool. I've been using it since I finished university back in 2011. It's very good at baking high poly to low poly, AO, Lots of different maps, and it's free as well, which is always good. So firstly, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to I'm just going to reset this whole thing so we can start thingy. So if you ever need to, if it's ever giving you any weird errors, you can restore default settings here. And now that's restored all the settings. So let's go to high definition mesh, and we're going to right click anywhere here and go add mesh. Now I need to find where that is again. Luckily I can just do this. Go like that. Just go back a folder. So navigate to where you just saved your FBXs, and I'm just going to put the HP version in there. Now leave that and then go to low definition, and then I'm going to click right click, add mesh. I'm going to add the low poly. Now what this is the low poly is your cage. So it's going to bake how close it is to the actual mesh. So this is cage baking. And we can use this, which sometimes this calculates the distance between your high poly and your low poly. This is, and I'll show you this in a min. So let me just try and find that. So baking options. So we need an output file. So output. I'm going to call this floor texture. Save. Now I didn't put prefix normal map because it's going to put a normal map prefix in it anyway. I'm going to bake this at 2048 by 2048. Edge padding. This is the distance between the shells. So 16 is too much. If we bake that, actually, let's just bake that on a lower map so it's quicker, and just generate it. You'll see all this edge padding, which is not right. It's not what we want. If we just load that up in, not Notepad. What am I doing? I'll put. Where are you? Do you like this piece? Cancel. You'll see that the bake has been distorted. That's because there's quite a bit of edge padding in between the UV shells, so we don't want that. So make sure that's set to 0 or 2 or 1 if you do want some edge padding. Bucket size is the little windows that do the rendering. I tend to put mine to 128. I tend to put my anti-aliasing up to 4 times. Let's put this texture, no, not 4K. Don't do that, Matt. If you never need to flip the coordinates, you can do here. Make sure this is always ticked, and make sure this is the color you're going to use for the normal map. So if I click generate map, what did I do? I know what I did. There you go. Let's try that again. Okay, and just minimize that for a minute. Let me reopen this. Yeah, update. And you'll see that it's baked it. It's baked all that detail down. Now when we apply this, so if I go File, Save As, what I am going to do is rename it. All depends where you're working this is. So if we apply this in May, I'm just going to hide it, press H to hide it, and then I'm just going to assign a new material. So right click, assign new material, blend, because you want the blend, want map, file, then you need to change this to tangent space, and then find where your file is. Sorry, got a bit of a cold. Okay, now it's not showing because I need to hit 6 on the keyboard. And I'm just going to change the renderer to legacy high quality. So renderer, legacy high quality. And you can see now, all that detail is now showing on my low poly. So I've gone from having a high poly mesh, which is 54,000 tries, to 170 tries. And all that detail is there. So I'm going to show you how to bake from a plane. So like I was saying, there was 2 methods. You can bake from a plane or you can cage bake. So the method I just showed you was cage baking, and this method is baking from a plane. So I'm just going to hide this because I don't need this. Now this is good for, say you were making a bolt, for example. So let's make a bolt. I'll just press Control A to get my channel box. It's also up here. I'm just going to change the subdivisions to say 6. So it's bolt shaped. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the edge. I'm going to add a bevel to it. I'm just going to bring this bevel up. So I'll do that again because I didn't tell you exactly what I did. So I double clicked on the edge, shift right click, bevel edge. Actually, point 2. Now, with baking, with high poly, if it's at a 90-degree angle, it won't work. It cannot capture anything. So you need to make sure you add bevels into the areas that you want to capture the detail. Now, one thing I want to do is, I'm just going to get rid of this back face here. So I'm going to select the vert, so right click, vertex, select it, control, right click, to face, to face. It's just a quicker selection tool. I'm just going to grab the verts and drag them up. Okay, so now, obviously, if you wanted to make this a bit more advanced, you could do, but this should capture a decent bolt. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to move this here, and then I'm going to grab a plane, and I'm going to scale that up a bit, and I'm going to just freeze the transformations a minute. I'm going to go down to polyplane. I'm just going to put this to 1. Now you'll notice, as long as this is a square, it should be fine. So let's have a look at the, yeah, that's what you want. You want the whole UV set of the plane to be the whole between 0 and 1. If it's outside, it's not going to work. If it's squished, it's going to come out warped in here. I'm just going to put this here in the top quadrant, and then I'm going to bring this plane slightly up, so it's just sitting above it. Okay, and I'm going to call this bolt mesh. This is the outline, by the way, which can be found here. And I'm just going to go okay, so to begin with, I'm just going to freeze, delete the history, and export it. So I'll grab that, double click that. I'm going to do the same with that. History. Okay. Now, if we navigate back to here and go to, we can turn that off, add mesh. Now your high definition model for this is actually your bolt. So that's where the detail is going to come from, is your bolt. And then your bake plane. See, I've named this wrong. It should be LP. Okay. Now if you navigate to tools and click ray distance calculator, what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the distance between that bake plane and that high poly. So go. I tend to leave mine on for about 30 seconds. So you click stop and then copy results. Close. Now that has, where is it? That's actually put these calculations here now. This one here. Okay. So before we were just using the distance for the cage. Now we've actually calculated the distance between the high poly and the low poly bait plane. Now I'm just going to rename this. So baking options. Bolt. Save. And where are you? Generate. Close. And you'll see now that we have a bolt. So now what I can do with this is actually, if I grab the magic wand, I can cut out the background, so make sure I just unlock the layer, grab Control C, Control V, and then just scale it to roughly the size. So instead of modelling every single bolt, which would be a pain in the backside, we can just make a selection of them. There you go, and then I can Control G to group this. Just zoom in so we get a nice. There you go. And you can see now I can actually. What I'm going to do is actually I'm going to merge this. So select the layer, merge, and then all I'm doing is Alt, Shift, dragging. That's all I'm doing to duplicate it. But because I've got it as a selection, not just a layer selection, it's duplicating it on the same layer, so I'm not having to worry about multiple layers and then merging them down. It's just a quicker method, really. I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to do the same, but what I did then was Control D to deselect, and then Control left click on the group on the layer, and then Alt Shift. There you go. You see quickly we've just made bolts instead of having to painstakingly put each one on. That's the thing. I also used a other method as well. I used Xdo to create these details. Where are you? These details here. Now, for this mesh, I've simplified it. We're just using this bit here, but also in the final mesh there was pipe work underneath, and this was the actual piping. So I created all this using Xdo. Now you can do that. I've done a video before, so you can have a look at that and how I created that. But like this wiring and this pipe work, this rivet detail as well. So you can use a selection. So I tend to do a bit of high poly as well as using Xdo to help create some of the detail. So it's just whatever's quickest for you and whatever's quickest in the pipeline at the place that you're working at. Okay, so in the next video I'm going to show you how we're going to bake out a colour map for this, and then we'll take this into Ddo and create some textures for it.